We're all using AI pretty much constantly. But have you ever just stopped and wondered how it actually learns? I mean, how can a machine that only gets ones and zeros learn to understand what a cat is, or something way more abstract like what a king is? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works. So let's start with the big puzzle, right? A computer, at its heart, just sees numbers. That photo you took of your cat? To the computer, it's just a giant grid of color values. The actual word cat? Just a sequence of code. So, how on earth does it get from those cold, hard numbers to the warm, fuzzy idea of a cat? That's the huge challenge we're going to unpack. All right, let's dive right in. If an AI is going to be useful to us, it has to have some way of making sense of our incredibly messy world. It needs to take all this raw information, pictures, text, sounds, and somehow organize it into something that actually has meaning. To make this super clear, let's use an analogy. I want you to imagine a brand new AI is a librarian. They've just been put in charge of this massive library. But there's a catch. Every single book is written in a language they absolutely cannot read. Not one word. And their job is to organize the entire thing. Sounds pretty much impossible, doesn't it? And this slide just perfectly shows the journey. On the left, that's where we start. A giant, messy pile of books. It's complete chaos. And on the right, that's the goal, a beautifully organized library where all the related books are sitting right next to each other. So, how does our librarian get from that chaos to that perfect order if they can't even read the titles? So let's get into how this seemingly impossible job even begins. Our librarian has to start somewhere, right? And the way they do it introduces us to one of the most important ideas in all of modern AI. And that big idea is called representation learning. It's basically the process where the AI teaches itself. It figures out how to take all that messy, raw data, all those books in our library, and automatically build its own internal map of how everything connects. And the really crucial part? It does all of this completely on its own, with zero human help. So where do they begin? Well, honestly, it starts with total randomness. Just like our librarian might just start putting books on shelves anywhere, an AI begins with its internal settings, these things called weights, set to completely random values. It has no idea, none whatsoever, that a book about kings probably shouldn't be next to a book about baking. It's a true blank slate. Okay, so if the librarian starts with just a random mess on the shelves, how do they ever figure out the right way to organize things? Well, it's actually pretty clever. They just watch people. The secret, it turns out, is all in the context. And this breaks down that learning process perfectly. So first, our librarian just observes. They just watch and see which books people tend to take out at the same time. Then, based on that, they make a little prediction. They think, okay, if someone checks out this book, they'll probably like this one too. Step 3, they see if they were right. If their guess was helpful, great. If not, that's an error. And then, here's the most important part, step 4, they adjust. They literally nudge the books that are used together just a little bit closer on the shelves. And this isn't a one-time thing. They do this again and again and again, millions, sometimes billions of times. Now, this whole process of learning from its mistakes has a fancy technical name, backpropagation. Every single time the AI gets a prediction wrong, a tiny little error signal gets sent backwards through its whole system. And that signal tells it to make a very small adjustment to its internal map to, nudge those books just a tiny bit. This is the engine that drives all of the learning. So what actually happens after our librarian does this millions and millions of times? After they've watched countless people and made all these tiny adjustments to the shelves? Well, something kind of magical starts to happen. They start to figure out this really basic rule, which this quote sums up perfectly. Basically, things that show up in similar situations just naturally start to get grouped together. The AI starts building this map where closeness is meaning. Related stuff just ends up near each other, not because the AI was told to do it, but because that's what the patterns in the data suggested. Let's make this super concrete. Picture the AI's internal map at the very beginning of its training. The ideas for king and queen are just two random dots, probably on completely opposite sides of the map. The AI has absolutely no clue that they're related in any way. But then the learning starts. The AI starts churning through millions of sentences from all over the internet, and it sees the word king pop up next to words like royal, palace, and throne. And then it sees the word queen appearing right next to those exact same words. That's the context clue. That's our librarian noticing people are always checking out the King book with the Palace book. And because it sees that shared context over and over again, it makes that tiny little adjustment. It nudges the King dot just a little bit closer to the Queen dot. And after seeing the same pattern thousands of times, those two dots are now sitting right next to each other on its map. And just like that, it's done. The AI has learned the relationship, not because it has any idea what royalty is, but because it figured out that in our language, context is king. Okay, so all this talk about abstract maps and librarians, why does any of it matter to you? Well, it turns out this is the absolute secret sauce behind so much of the technology that we rely on every single day. This map of meaning, it's everything. When you type something into a search engine, it's using this map to find concepts that are close by, not just the exact words you typed. When a streaming service recommends a movie, it's because on its giant map of movies and people, you and that movie are in a very similar neighborhood. It's how language translation works. It's how a chatbot can actually hold a conversation that makes sense. It all comes back to the map. And this, right here, is the final kind of mind-blowing thing to wrap your head around. The AI never actually understood what a king or a queen is. It never had a single thought about royalty. All it did was build an incredibly detailed and accurate map of how all of these words and ideas connect to each other, based only on context. The meaning was never inside the AI itself. The meaning is the map. So that kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. Just by learning from context, an AI can build a map of human language so good that it feels like real understanding. If it can do that for our world, what other incredibly complex systems could it learn to map out next? Are there any limits? It really makes you think. Thanks for watching.